For the past few weeks, if you've been with us, we have been in a series called Sabbath, okay? Sabbath. And it has been an awesome series, and I'm really, really excited about today. But before we get into talking about Sabbath, I've got a question for you guys, all right? I want to know, when you were a kid, what was your favorite TV show? All right, just yell it out at me. What was your favorite TV show? I heard Spider-Man. Give me a couple more. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Okay, give me some more. Okay, Thundercats. Veggie Tales. Got some Christian kids over here. All right, so there was a lot of TV shows, and if you're a kid now, I mean, there's so much that you can watch on TV, right? We've got Netflix and all this. There's a lot of great TV shows. But when I was growing up, okay, we liked ESPN, we liked things like that. But what my favorite TV show was, or I guess I should say my favorite TV channel, my favorite TV channel was Animal Planet. Because if you turned on Animal Planet at the right time, there was this crazy Australian guy. Anyone remember him? Steve Irwin, right? Steve Irwin. And while other people may have had interesting things to say on TV, there was nobody, okay, that was riding around a boat in the middle of Australia at night and saying, "Come on, Terry, we're looking for a crocodile, Terry. We're looking for the biggest one we've ever seen." And then they find him, they see the little eyes at night, and what do? He just jumps out of the boat, right? Jumps out of the boat and grabs a full-grown crocodile. He's wrestling, "Get over here, Terry, get over here. What a beauty," right? There was nobody else on TV doing something like that. They load up that crocodile in the back of the Jeep. They're driving back, and he's giving you some dialogue as he's driving, and then all of a sudden, slam on brakes. We're running out of the car. What are we doing? Oh, it's a king cobra. What a beauty. What a beauty. I'm face to face with one of the most venomous snakes in all the world. Like, with one bite, take my whole face off. And Steve loved it, right? Steve loved it. And when you watch this show, again, there may have been other people at that time that were saying, "Guys, animal conservation is such a good thing that we should all be a part of." But there was nobody, right, that captured our attention like Steve Irwin. Why? Because when you thought about Steve Irwin, you thought about delight. You thought about, this guy isn't just talking about it. This guy loves it. He loves these animals. He loves what he gets to do. He loves what he's a part of. And when I think about how we're going to make an impact on planet Earth, I think it's going to be through delight. It's going to be by not just knowing things about Jesus, but by truly loving him, by truly delighting in him and seeing how he changes us. So in order to start our story, we're going to start where all good stories start, and that is in the beginning, okay? In the beginning, when we go to Genesis and we're looking at the creation narrative, right? You've heard this before, but God gets busy. In the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth, and then over the course of 6 days, he's working, right? And what does he say at the end of every day? He says, "And God looked at all that he had made, and behold, it was very good," right? It was very good. He's using the words of delight. It was good. But here's what you got to know, okay? Sometimes the Bible will give you some major understatements. And I think that this word, when God looked at everything he made and it was just good, is one of those major understatements, okay? Because when just think about it, right? God could have made the world black and white and boring and dull and two-dimensional, right? But he made it bright and vibrant and beautiful. He made things that we still haven't even discovered yet. Thousands and thousands of years of being on the earth, we still haven't even reached all the depths of the oceans or the brilliance of the galaxies. We're scratching the surface. And on day one, he made that and he's just like, it's good, right? And the thing about food, right? He could have made food, he could have made everything taste like celery, okay? Just everything. No offense if you love celery and stuff, but come on. He could have made everything taste like celery, but he gave coffee and chocolate, and he gave some of you incredible capacity to take the raw ingredients of the earth and turn it into things that are good and that are delicious. And think about procreation. He could have made us all like starfish, right? When we need another one, we just pop off a limb and there's a new one, right? He could have done that. But look, he literally put nervous systems in your body so that procreation would feel good. He made all of this. He set up a whole world for delight. He hardwired you and me to enjoy him. Sometimes I wish that Genesis 1 was written by Steve Irwin, okay? Because I think what he would have done is he would have looked at everything and he'd say, crikey, mate, it's beautiful, right? There's nothing like it. It's incredible. But then we get to day 7, and on day 7, God does something surprising and yet also beautiful. And you already know probably, but on day 7, he rests, right? On day 7, God rests. And so I want us to read this passage. It's in Genesis 2. We're just going to read verses 1 through 3. And it says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day, God finished the work that he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all the work that he had done." This word rested here is where we get, the Hebrew word behind that rested is Shabbat. It's where we get our word Sabbath. It means he stopped, he ceased, he rested. Okay? And then it says, after this, it says, "So God blessed the 7th day, and he made it holy, because on that day, God rested from all the work he had done in creation." So we're going to talk a good bit about what it means to stop and to rest and Shabbat. But what I want to begin by talking about is God blessed the 7th day, and he made it holy. If you're familiar with that word holy, I know it kind of sounds like a Christian word, but in the origins of that word, what it really means is just set apart. Okay? Maybe like you have your favorite coffee cup, right? And people may use every other coffee cup, but your coffee cup they may not use, okay? Because you have consecrated your coffee cup to yourself. You have made your coffee cup holy. You set it apart. And what God does here is for 6 days he's been working, but then on this day he rests, and therefore he sets it apart. He blessed it. He put it into the fabric of creation. But what we all ask is, why? Like, God, there's so much you could have done. Why Sabbath? Why rest? And if you've ever been in like a small group or missional community type environment and you read this passage, what's the first thing that everyone asks? They read this, God rested on the 7th day from all his work, and what do we ask? Why did God need to rest? Was God like tired or something, right? From breathing out galaxies and, making everything that we see and stuff. Was he like just wore out, need a little R&R? Right? And no, in other passages, such as in Isaiah, it tells us that God never sleeps or slumbers. Okay? He doesn't need to rest. He doesn't get worn out the way you and I get worn out. But the question is, why rest then? Why would God rest? And usually when we answer that question, we begin by saying, well, he did it for us. Right? He stopped because you and we need to stop. He stopped to put it in the fabric of creation. He gave it as a gift for us. Let me show you an example of that. If you go into Exodus, you can just follow along on the screen, but it's going to be in Exodus 16. The people were in bondage. The Israelites were in bondage in Egypt. And what does God do? He rescues them. He delivers them. When they were in bondage to this guy named Pharaoh. And guess what Pharaoh made them do? Work. And never rest. Every single day is work, work, work. So when God brings them out and delivers them, what does he do? He says, hey, you're not in captivity anymore. You're not in bondage anymore. Pharaoh's not your leader anymore. I'm your God. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remind you of what I've wanted all along. I'm going to give you rest. Okay, so he tells them, this is how it worked out for them. He says that on 6 days, I'm going to give you food. They called it manna, okay? They were hungry. They needed food. God was going to provide for them. And so the way he was going to provide for them is on 6 days, every day they would walk outside, and there'd be this bread-like thing, think communion, little manna pieces, like something like that. And they were just going to be able to go in, scoop it up, and they had all they needed for that day. God provided for them. But then on the 6th day, they were instructed, go out and gather double. Gather enough for today, but also gather enough for tomorrow, because on the 7th day, there's not going to be any manna, because instead of working, I want you to rest, right? I want you to rest. And then this is what happened. I want you to read or look at this passage with me. Exodus 16, look at how it describes it. It says, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. The Lord has given you the Sabbath. And therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. The purpose of Sabbath was a gift, okay? It was saying, stop. You don't have to work. You're not belonging to Pharaoh anymore. I'm your God, and I'm giving you rest. But then what happens to them? These people, they had literally just heard this, and then they wake up on the seventh day, and they go out just like normal, right? Looking for some manna, going to go scoop up some more. And they get outside, and they're like, where's it at? Where's all the manna? And God says, don't you remember I just now told you that you're going to have to rest? And so because God wanted them to rest, and because they were not willing to listen to him, God instituted this idea of Sabbath as more than just a rhythm of creation, but as an actual rule for his people. And we read in things like the Ten Commandments that God took this gift of the Sabbath and turned it into a rule. You must keep the Sabbath. You must do it. And we could talk a little bit about like why did he do that and stuff like this, but I want you to see that the original heartbeat was always gift. The original heartbeat was never that Sabbath would be a dreary day of religious duty. It was always about delight. I want to show you one more passage to help us kind of understand this idea of what even is rest, why do we need it, stuff like that, because I think that a lot of us, we ask the question, why did God rest, and why do I need to rest? Because we very narrowly define what rest is and why we need it, okay? So what I want us to do is expand our concept for what rest is and why we need it. To do that, I'm going to fast forward us for a second, and we're going to go to Exodus 40, okay? Again, you can just follow along on the screen. So Exodus 40, for the past 10 chapters of Exodus, the people have been working on building this thing called the tabernacle, okay? The tabernacle. And this was going to be a place where God came and he dwelled with his people. God was going to dwell with his people. And when you read these chapters and you're reading about it being built and all kinds of stuff like this, the Garden of Eden imagery, like Genesis imagery, is all over it. All over this thing, okay? But then what happens? After they've put up the pillars and they've consecrated the priest and they've done all their sacrifices and duties and stuff, and the tabernacle is finally finished. Look at how this verse says in Exodus 40, verse 34. It says, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, that's the tabernacle, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Or some translations say, the glory of the Lord rested there. Okay? And so what we see is that the tabernacle was finished when they had put the post up and covered it. But the tabernacle wasn't complete until God filled it. The tabernacle wasn't complete until God's presence was there. And I think when we look back at what's happening in Genesis, God finished his creation in 6 days, but creation wasn't complete until God rested there, until his presence was there. God always made Sabbath as a day where we could know him, delight in him, where his presence could come and dwell among us. But again, going in my Steve Irwin voice for just one more second, I don't know if I can do it. He would say, there is a danger in losing our delight. Okay? Delight is something that's good and beautiful, but there is actually a danger in losing it. Okay? And I want us to show us that in Genesis chapter 3. This is the story of Adam and Eve with the snake and the fall. Okay? And I want us to just read this together. Genesis 3, starting in verse 1. Now the serpent, he was more crafty. Can you say that? Crafty. He was more crafty. The word here carries the idea of he was subtle and deceptive. Okay? He was subtle and deceptive, and he was more subtle and deceptive than any other beast in the field that the Lord God had made. And the serpent said to the woman, did God actually say that you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may. We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. But God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the one tree that's in the midst of the garden, and neither shall you touch it, lest you die. But the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit, and she ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. This is the beginning of the fall for all of humanity. And if you notice this verse right here, this last verse, this passage is dripping with the language of delight. right? She looked, and the tree was good for food. It was a delight to the eyes. It was a tree to be desired. And God had made Adam and Eve and all of us, right, to want, to desire him, to desire good things. We are hardwired for delight. But what does the serpent do? He lies to her. And what is the lie that's undergirding all this? The lie that's undergirding this whole interaction right here is that God is holding out on you. And you see it in the conversation. He says, did God really say, right, that you can't eat of any tree in the garden? I think that maybe he's questioning the truthfulness of God, but honestly, I think he's questioning, is God even reasonable? Did he really say, come on, man, are you kidding me? He really said that? So he starts questioning God's character, and then he says, wait, so you can eat of any tree but this one? Oh, but what he didn't tell you is this is the only one that really matters. Who cares about all those trees? That's the only one that really matters. And then he says, and when you eat it, you're going to know good and evil, and hey, more than that, you're going to be like God. You're going to be like God. The crazy thing was, they already were. Adam and Eve were created just like you and me in God's image and his likeness. They were like God. But he lied to them. He deceived them. And what a lie does is it goes into our mind, but then what happens in our heart? The lie goes into our mind and it produces dissatisfaction in our heart. What the serpent did was he twisted delight into dissatisfaction. And you begin to question, if God's holding out on me in this area, where else is he holding out on me? What else is he keeping from me? Why isn't he giving me everything? What kind of God would do that? Why would he do that? And I don't know about you, but I've felt that. Anybody felt that? Like maybe you're a single person and you want to be married and you're like, all God had to do was give me that one thing. That one thing. If I would be married, I'd be happy, right? And if he could, and he can't even give me that one thing? Okay, or maybe you've got some dream in your heart, whether it's you want to have a child, or you want to have a business, or you just want to do something. God's put that in your heart, and then it hasn't been realized yet, and you're like, God couldn't just give me that one thing. That one thing. And again, the lie of the enemy is that he is holding out on you. He's holding out of you, and what he's doing is he's twisting your delight into dissatisfaction. And what happens when that is full grown? It gives birth to sin. The lie produces dissatisfaction, which leads to sin and ultimately death. Okay? That's what's going on in this passage. Eve says, if God's not going to give it to me, I'll just take it for myself. I'll get it. I'll get what I need. I'll take care of me. Right? So the lie produces dissatisfaction, which leads to sin and ultimately death. So what's the reverse of the curse? What's the undoing of that? I've got like a little chart that hopefully will spell this out for us. So, but again, the lie produces dissatisfaction, leads to or gives birth to sin, and ultimately death. So the truth that God is good. I can delight in him. He's not holding out of me. What does that do? It produces fruit, okay? And ultimately, it leads to life. So what we need to see is there is a danger in losing your delight. There is a danger in losing your delight. If we fast forward a little bit to the people of Israel, they go out. God tries basically every card in the book in order to get them to continue following him, right? To get them to continue to obey him and stuff like that. He tries warning them. He teaches them. He allows them to be conquered in case it will bring repentance. There's lots of different strategies that God uses to keep his people walking with him. But as I was studying and I was reading for this, something stood out to me that's literally never stood out to me. And I was reading it, I was like, this is absolutely incredible. The chief strategy to keep God's people continuing to walk with him was that they enjoy him, that they delight in him. One example of this is in Psalms chapter 119, okay? And it's all over this chapter. This chapter, most people think, was written as the people were returning from exile. So they were in exile, right? They've been taken into captivity, and they're returning. So what's on their mind? Let's make sure we never go through that again, okay? And how does the psalmist make sure that they never go through that again? Make sure they never end up in bondage and in slavery again? Does he wall them off with rules? Does he yell at them and say, you stupid people, what were you thinking? What does he do? He writes this whole psalm, the longest one in the Bible, about delight. I'm just going to show you a few verses in it. Verse 11, Psalms 119. I have treasured your word in my heart so that I may not sin against you. Verse 14, I rejoice in the way revealed by your decrees as much as in all riches. Verse 16, I will delight in your statutes. I will not forget your word. Literally, we could read the whole passage and we could just underline like almost every verse, okay? The strategy to keep people walking with Jesus or walking with God was not duty, it was delight. My youth pastor, when I was growing up, he used to say it to us like this. We grew up a little bit in the country, okay? And he would say, if you guys had a bunch of cows, right? You had a bunch of cows and you needed to keep your cows in the field. How are you going to do it? And, a couple of the country boys would be like, you got to build a fence. Yep, build a big fence, put it all the way around and keep them in. And we were all like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And he would say, that's one way to keep your cows in the field. But what happens? Those cows are constantly going to be running up against the edge of that fence. They're going to be rubbing it. They're going to be breaking stuff. They're going to be trying to get out. If you build a huge fence, not only is it expensive, you're constantly going to be doing repairs. They're constantly going to be trying to get out. It works, but it's not the best solution. So what is the solution? He says, if you want to keep your cows in the field, you put a lake right in the middle of the field. And what's going to happen is the cows are going to keep on having to come back and get water time after time and again. And they're going to stay because they know that that is a source of life, okay? And when I think about you, when I think about the teenagers in this room, what's going to keep you walking with Jesus when you go to college, okay? Or when life gets busy and you're in your 30s, or whenever you go through real heartbreak and you're in your 40s or your 50s, or whenever you start losing a lot of people that are dear to you when you're in your 70s, what's going to keep you walking with Jesus? Is it going to be the fence, the do's and don'ts of Christianity and things? Or is it going to be that you loved him? You love him. You enjoy him. You know him, right? And I'm just saying what we're talking about in students, what I care about, what's the desire of my heart, is that we would raise up a generation that loves him, that says there's nobody like him, nobody in all the earth like him. Who do I have? That's what Peter will say. Who do I have but him? Where would I go but to you? So Sabbath is awesome. It prevents destruction. It produces depth. But what else does it do? Sabbath realigns our priorities, and it produces in us a spirit of dependence, okay? A spirit of dependence. In Psalms 46, there's this verse, and it says, be still and know that I am God. If you remember back in the garden, the temptation was to be God. The antidote in Psalms 46 is to be still. Be still. Stop. Rest. And know that I am God. That I am God. And that I will be exalted among the nations. And I will be exalted in the earth. If you think about it, it is easy to stay up late at night focusing on our agenda. What Austen has to do today, what I hope to accomplish with my life, all my goals and dreams and ambitions and all that. And I can stay up all night worrying about what I got to do. And then literally the psalmist says, go to sleep and know that he's God. And when you go to sleep, not only are you knowing that he's God, but you're realigning your priorities with his, right? He will be exalted among the nations. He will be exalted in the earth. Do we have a part to play in that? Absolutely. And that's exciting. Does it depend on us? Absolutely not. And that's so encouraging. That's so encouraging. I can sleep at night because there is a God with a confident authority that he will accomplish his purposes, truthfully, with me or without me. But I can go to sleep trusting that. Rest is an act of faith. I've been thinking recently a lot about Genesis, right? Genesis 1, how God created the earth, and you start to notice some patterns as you read it, such as each day after creation, it says that there was evening and morning. And then it'll say like the first day, right? Gets to day 2, he creates a bunch of stuff, and then it says there was evening and morning the second day. Does that all 6 days. And you read that, and you're like, as you think about it, you're like, that doesn't really make sense, because when I think about my day, I think about there's morning, and then there's evening. But for the Jewish person in the Hebrew culture, they had evening, and then they had morning. Again, the picture is this. The picture is you lay down and rest, God works. You wake up, and you see what God has done. You lay down and rest. You lay down and trust. You wake up. You see what God has done. We even see this in Adam and Eve. Think about it. In creation was made, right? It was finished in 6 days. Which day was Adam and Eve created? Day 6, right? Day 6. And then when does Sabbath happen? When is this day of rest? Day 7. And so Sabbath happens, rest comes on the 7th day of creation, but for Adam and Eve, it was their first day. Adam and Eve's first day was a rest day. And why? Was it because they were so tired? Were they worn out from being created and stuff? Right? They hadn't done a single thing. If they're like a brand new body and you're like, well, this is awesome, what I'm thinking is, let's go. Let's get busy. Let's do something. Right? And their first day is a rest day. And I think that what God is trying to show us in all this is because when you lead, when you work out of a posture of rest, it changes everything. You begin working on God's priorities. You work in his power. You go with his purposes, things like that. The alternative is, I just make my life all about me, and then on Saturday I crash and hope I can do it again, right? No. The rest day, the Sabbath, was fueling how we live every other day of the week, right? Before we do a single thing, we rest because we need to know that we depend on God, right? And we need to align our priorities with him. Personally, this has been convicting for me as we're in week 3 of this series. I've been listening in just like you each week. And as I look at it, I felt this internal resistance in me of, okay, that sounds good what you're saying on stage and stuff, but Saturday, I'm still got work to do. All these people, they look tired and burned out and weary, but I got a job. I got to put in work, make things happen, stuff like this. And I found this internal resistance in me towards rest. So I started analyzing that a little bit. Austen, why is it that you don't rest? Okay, is it that you're so busy? Is it that okay, maybe. But what is it? What is it really? Why are you not resting? And what I realized for myself at least, and I think it's true for a lot of us, is what we rest in reveals what we trust in. And I've started noticing in myself that my inability to rest is at least in large part due because in a lot of times I functionally trust in me. And so I trust in my abilities, my performance, right? How you guys respond to me. I trust in that. And so because I trust in me, I got to stay up all night making sure it's perfect. I got to make sure I think through every little what-if scenario, okay, because it all depends on me. But what God has really been doing in my own heart, personally, is helping me realize it really doesn't all depend on you, right? And actually, there's a danger in thinking that it does all depend on you. There's a passage, we shared this with our adult leaders and students last week, but I've just been thinking about it all week. It's in Psalms 127. And it says, unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor over it in vain. And unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays alert in vain. In vain, they get up early, and in vain, they stay up late, working hard to have enough food. But the Lord gives sleep to the one he loves. Been thinking about that and thinking about the idea that it is more dangerous than advertised to trust in yourself. Not only do you not get sleep, but it says that even the work that you do is in vain. Right? The house gets built, but God's not in it. Right? There's no real power, okay, in the work you do if God's not in it. And so what I've been trying to remind and recognize in myself is, Austen, you can go to sleep tonight because you can know and you can believe that God can do more while you're sleeping than you could do when you're awake. It's trust, it's faith, and that helps us rest. The last thing I want us to talk about today is just the idea that delight, this thing of delight, it's invitational. It's something you're being invited into. You know, me, my brother, my dad's here today. We love to play golf, for example. Okay, we love to play golf. And I'm gonna tell you, if you ever were out on the golf course with me and one of us were to take a swing and we were to hit a hole in one, you would not have to tell us to delight. Okay, it would come very, very natural. I don't want to fully demonstrate, but we would be absolutely pumped. Okay, you wouldn't have to tell us to delight. My sister, you know, she loves sweets and cookies and stuff, and I love to pick on her about that. If I was to hand her a cookie and she was to eat it, no one has to tell her to say, yum. Okay? It just comes naturally. So what am I saying to you? I don't need to teach you to delight. What needs to happen is we need to make room for it. We need to fill our lives with things that are good and that are beautiful, that are praiseworthy, things that bring us joy, right? When we look at it, we're like, wow, I never thought about it like that. That's unbelievable. That's a treasure. And what it does is it's our natural response to delight. In the past, there were common Sabbath practices that people would do to help them remember to delight. They would do things like they would go and eat good food on the Sabbath, right? Enjoy it. It's like literally God telling you, eat some chocolate cake and enjoy it, all right? They would get some sleep because our bodies need it. We're a tired generation. I don't need to tell you stats on that. We're tired, right? Get some sleep and enjoy it. Go and spend time with your friends. Get a community together. Gather and enjoy it, right? We're looking at all this kind of stuff, and I think the purpose is we're supposed to look at, man, it was a great day with my friends, and I really enjoyed that cake, and then the sunset was beautiful, and worship has been amazing, and this person encouraged me, and everything's been so good, and God, you're good. God, you're good. You made all of this? You made all of this, and I'm just scratching the surface on it? You're good. Who is like you? Who is like you in all the earth? Last thing, I'll kind of wrap up with this. I was thinking about this. Didn't even tell the first service this, so you guys are getting a special treat. In Matthew chapter 11, Jesus is going to be talking about the Sabbath, and there's going to be some religious people that are upset at him because they're like, hey, the Sabbath is a bunch of don'ts. Don't work, don't pick up your mat, follow these rules, make sure you do them, right? And they were angry at every time Jesus did something on the Sabbath. But Jesus, in Matthew 11, he says this. He says, come to me, all who are weary and all who are heavy laden or burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus was the personal embodiment of the Sabbath. Just like in that tabernacle, God's Spirit came to dwell and to rest with his people. In the person of Jesus was God coming to dwell with us, and then through his Spirit to eventually dwell in us. There's an invitation of Sabbath. There's an invitation of rest. There's an invitation, come to me. If you're tired or you're worn out or you're burdened or you're carrying a bunch of stuff and you don't know how to make it, there is strength in me. There's rest in me. There's courage. There's confidence. There's purpose. There's joy. There's delight in me. So come. Come to me. And this is the part I told you the last service didn't get, but the picture that was in my head when I was talking about that last service was this guy, okay? A little spoon. And I think that some of us, right? I think that some of us are trying to go out into the world, okay? And do all this, live this Christian life, do our best, encourage people, make it happen. But when it comes to the energy that we're operating on, we got a little spoonful. So we're carrying that into Monday morning with a shaky hand and hoping that this little spoonful of grace and of joy and of purpose and all that it'll last us for the rest of the week, that it'll last us with the things that we're carrying, that little spoonful is going to make it through. And so I brought this. It's pretty epic. It's golden. I mean, come on. It's a golden shovel. And what I want you to see is that I think that Sabbath is about being full. You no longer have to walk out into earth with a little spoonful of God's goodness. He's saying, come to me. I'm not going to hit the stage, but come to me and experience the shovelful. Okay, come to me and see that I'm good. The psalmist will say, taste and see that the Lord is good. See that my mercy is new every morning. See that I've got joy that you haven't even scratched the surface of. It's like you're cave diving and you're already 10 canyons deep, and then you turn a corner and you realize there's 10 more. God, you're bigger than I thought. You're more beautiful than I imagined. Everything I need is in you. So just to recap, on Sabbath, we stop, because on Sabbath, God fills. Fill us, God. Fill us. We need you. We need you. Let me just lead us in prayer, and we'll be done. God, I pray for our church, and I pray for everyone here that needs you, God, and needs you. They look at their life, and they're trying to make it. We're trying to hold it together. We're trying to just make ends meet, and we're working ourselves to the bone, God. And there's an invitation from a good Father that says, come to me. Find rest, find purpose, find joy, find delight. And you don't even have to go outside of me to find it. You can just come to me. And so I pray that for each person here, God, if you're speaking to anyone here, that you would just, right in the quietness of their own heart, that they would say, Lord, I see it. And I want to come to you. And I need your rest. And God, I'm just confident that if they reach out to you, that you're not far from any of us. That you're there and you provide. And I pray that you would do that today. I pray this in Jesus' name.